Hey, all, welcome to the Meaning Project podcast, where it meets the Soul Centered Defiant Spirit podcast. I am Baruch Levy, also known as B, and I'm here with my good friend, Dr. Daniel Franz. Dr. Dan, what's happening?
Not much, but everything and nothing, right? So staying busy. Summer's here in Farmville, Indiana, so enjoying a little bit of that, trying to get some good family time in, and trying to sort my way as well as the way of many others through these interesting times that we live in.
Well, I think that's why we do get together periodically, hopefully more often than not. We did a podcast a couple weeks ago and we're back together. But I know, at least I've heard from the people who listen to my podcast, that they really appreciate when we get together, share some ideas, all things Dr. Frankel, all things kind of meaning and
Mhm.
soul. And so we'll just keep it going and hopefully offer some insights to our listeners.
Absolutely, got some good feedback on our money podcast, and the listener of mine that is out there running, listening to this, really appreciated your shout out and carried that with him for quite a while.
Sounds good. Well, another shout out to him and all of our people who are working out right now. We will try and, time it with your jog just perfectly. So you should be done in about 28 minutes or so. All right,
There you
keep going.
go.
So, lots to talk about. Never a dull moment in the world we live in. And I know you have been doing a lot of speaking and guidance right now around meaning. And it sounds like you went to an interesting conference. I think we touched on that a couple weeks ago, but it sounds like the energy of it continues on.
Absolutely, yeah. That podcast, recapping the Purpose Summit, will be out here probably next week after this, and it was amazing. It was really, it took. It was funny. They used the word purpose all over the place, but everything I heard was meaning and experience and humanity and empathy, and brought it to the workplace, and many workplaces you wouldn't expect. And so, an offshoot of that work right now is some speaking engagements I have coming up with some associations of commercial construction contractors. And the interesting thing for me is, I mean, the businesses at the Purpose Summit, this particular business request, um, these aren't the places you normally think of as people centered, or what do they call it? The soft skills centered places. These are manufacturing firms, construction, working with difficult, hard, gritty work, and still struggling in mental health and asking for help with mental health.
I'm so grateful we live in a world now where we can have these conversations about meaning and purpose anywhere. I think it was off limits up until relatively recently in the workplace, certainly in the more, hands-on types of jobs. One of my clients, and really somebody who I just adore, work with every week, his name is Terry. He's a farmer, and he's enlightened me to the mental health struggles in the farming community, which is not something that would have really dawned on me. I mean, I grew up in Nebraska. I had friends who, had farms, not necessarily in Omaha, but outside of it. And so I, tangentially kind of familiar with the culture,
Mhm.
but I was not, it was not like, as they say in baseball, inside baseball, knowing the inner workings. And I was quite surprised, quite shocked at the statistics he shared with me.
Yeah, it's, living in Farmville, I have come across many a farmer, which is interesting. For me, it's usually been younger ones because I think we all encounter some of the older generations still struggling to accept the idea of mental health or asking for help for mental health. But an interesting point with that. I mean, farmers, manufacturing, dentists, nurses, teachers. Right now, everybody in whatever profession seems to be a little bit taxed. Everybody, well, not everybody, more people, in my experience, struggling with mental health. The calls I get for intakes on a daily basis, sadly, are more than I can even send back, much less, or respond to, much less say I'm sorry, I'm booked out, weeks and months right now. People are struggling, B.
People are struggling, and yet, right? We do now live in an era where we can have a podcast like this. We can talk about these things. We can bring the shadow conversations, as I've always kind of called them or thought of them, into the light. I've shared many times, but I grew up in a home where there was lots of shadow conversations, things that were you're not just not allowed to talk about, at least not directly. Sorry, I got a lot of background noise here. Hope you don't hear it. And like mental health in my family was something you didn't talk about, and we paid heavy consequences. My grandmother and my father both completing suicide, and so I committed long time ago to have these dark, more difficult conversations. But what I've seen over the past 10 years, maybe, is a willingness to have them in places again where normally you wouldn't want to talk about these issues.
Such a good point. Let's just start with family, right? Like, what an important place to have difficult conversations about dark places, right? It's got to start there for husbands and wives to have those conversations, families, children, to know, to talk about. And mental health doesn't have to be dark, but when we're struggling, it feels that way. And what an important opening for people to understand, like, you have to have those conversations.
So I literally just had this conversation today with a gentleman who has been protecting his family from some of those dark conversations because he thought it was a duty to them. I don't disagree. I mean, we're not supposed to dump everything on everybody all the time. We have to discern what's ours to share, what's somebody's to handle or hold, and when is the right time. But there is a right time with the right person for the right
Mhm.
reasons.
And right topic and right way to address that topic. And if you don't know all of those rights we just pointed out, or maybe a little confused about what's right versus maybe what might not be right, it's always a good idea to ask for guidance, ask for help, or check into other episodes of the Meaning Project and the Defiant Spirit podcasts.
Yes. I just was writing about this as well on two different ways to handle anger. We all have anger as an example. And one way, so our teacher, Dr. Viktor Frankl, really talks about you can either react or you can respond. His famous quote, between stimulus and response, there is a space.
Yep.
And in that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. And so either you're going to be bombarded by the stimuli of life and react, or you're going to respond. Well, I was writing about and talking to somebody about anger, and either it becomes explosive, or it goes inwards and it seeps out.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them, people are going to feel your anger. The question is, are you going to be intentional about what you're feeling? And like we're talking about, who you're feeling or who you're sharing it with, how you're sharing it, when you're sharing it, because you're going to share it.
Right. It's coming out one way or another. Do you want it to be a healthy direction and expressive and healing and solving, or that explosive volcano so many men are known for being, that we stuff and stuff and stuff, and we don't address and we don't deal with it, and then the slightest thing upsets it, and that's where those anger explosions come in. Going back into, we can go into some deep psychology here. Cognitive behavioral therapy, rational emotive behavior therapy talks a lot about exactly what you said about Dr. Frankl's quote, the idea that the world, there are stimuli in the world that are going to impact us. They're going to make us mad, glad, sad, angry, but we always have the opportunity to choose how we react to it. It's when we find that same stimulus over and over and over, and we continue to react in the same way, we narrow that window of time for which we have to think. And very often it takes a conscious effort. The example I come up with the most is a husband and wife partners, that the slightest behavior over time, after 10, 15, 20 years, if you don't stop to address it, it becomes an irritant, and that irritant causes that instant anger, rather than pausing to say, hey, I wish you wouldn't flick your fingernails across the floor, whatever it might be, right? We have to take that pause. We have to take that breath to think, how do I want to react to this?
So, Dr. Dan, you're my therapist, and I'm working with you right now. And I say to you, but you're being kind of naive because my wife makes me feel angry, right?
Oh, B, I love the way you set that one up. uh, right? Because that's the classic therapy, 101. Somebody makes me feel
But you
okay.
make it sound so easy, Dr. Dan, that I can just respond. But you know what? Like she keeps hammering me. She doesn't. I
Mhm.
actually adore my wife, but she keeps hammering me, and I
Right?
have no choice. Where's
Yeah.
this choice you're talking about?
Oh, you always have a choice, but the choice is to step back and have that important conversation. Whatever it is she keeps hammering you about, well, you got to understand what it is because obviously there's a concern there. She keeps bringing it up, bud. You got to address it at some point.
She keeps saying you spend too much time on the podcast with Dr. Dan and not enough time with me. Actually,
Oh, all right. Well, there you go. Then instead of
she
this
says spend
hour with
more time.
me,
No,
yeah,
she said,
right.
please spend more time with Dr. Dan, please.
A couple more each
Um,
week.
yeah, yeah. But then no, that's fundamental because, and you hear it all the time. I hear it all the time. I probably say it all the time and don't even realize it. I call it outsourcing our power. We
Mhm,
outsource, we outsource jobs to China or whatever. We outsource our power to others, to
mhm.
people, to events, to narcotics, whatever it is,
Right. Inanimate objects, whatever.
inanimate objects.
Yeah. Yeah, when we allow ourselves, our emotions to be controlled by things outside of us, you're right. I love that idea. Outsourcing our emotions, outsourcing our behavior, outsourcing our lives at some point when we continue to allow that to happen and make that excuse. Well, so and so made me feel this. That happened to me, right? Dr. Frankel talks about taking responsibility, responsible action. We always have the ability to respond. We just have to find it sometimes.
And so coming back to why, somebody might not share with their family the dark, we'll call them the darker emotions or the more difficult topics. I think it comes down to that partially because if I do take ownership of the anger, back to my example, then it's me. It's who I am. And I don't want to be an angry person. I don't want to identify so deeply with that fill in the blank dark emotion. And so I keep it at a distance. I don't want my kids to see that piece of me. I mean, maybe it's depression, maybe it's alcoholism, whatever it is. And so I'll put up a false wall, right?
Mhm.
A kind of a facade. And because I don't want them to see me that way. And B, I don't want to be identified with that ugly thing.
Mhm.
So how do we come to terms with that so that we can share it?
Mhm.
Because otherwise it's too painful.
Beautiful example of that this week. An individual I was talking to said, these recent shootings have had a significant impact on me. I just don't know what it is yet. And we talked about, my nature is, hey, what resources can I send you? What parts of this should we be talking about? But to step back and question, okay, first of all, do you want this? This individual had several small children in different elementary schools and like that, so it was very personal as well. I said, well, do you want to take action? Do you want to approach your school board? What direction do you want to go? And he said, no, I'm not ready for that yet. I still need to process internally, and laid out a plan to step back. He said, I need to take an hour maybe in my office just to think through this and what it means to me. And I know I can't do it around my kids because we all know when you're deep in thought, whether it's meditation or prayer or self-reflection, and your 4-year-old says, can I have a popsicle? Um, First of all, that interrupts any prayer or meditation. And that is probably the most important thing in the world, is to attend to your child at that moment. But it's very difficult to go through any deep insight or growth, right? So recognizing for that person, they needed to get away and to do some self-assessment. Maybe that meant journaling or just reflection. Maybe it meant prayer or meditation, and a decision of, how do I integrate my thoughts and feelings into my experience right now without becoming callous to the idea. Do I want to take action? Do I want to protect my kids? Do I want to go out into the world and do something different? Or do I find a way to have other responsible action?
That's a great insight as always. If I'm grappling with, let's say, gamble, I have a gambling addiction and I know I need to talk about it, but it's just so painful. I think one of the ways we start that process is by introspection, is by
Mhm.
right sitting down with a journal and writing about it, sitting down and praying about it, sitting down and meditating with it. It's going on a little, sabbatical to really feel the feelings as opposed to try and outrun them.
Yeah.
And in our society, I think we oftentimes do a good job of trying to outrun problems. Well, like the shooting,
Hmm.
I sent out a blog on this topic that the moment, like literally hours after the shooting, you had politicians railing this direction or that direction, and it was too soon.
Hmm.
Right? It's too soon. In the Jewish tradition, forgive me if we spoke about this last time. When somebody dies, you sit shiva. You have 7 days where you just sit
Hmm.
and grieve. You don't do anything. There's nothing expected of you. You just sit in it. And we've lost the art of just sitting in it.
Absolutely. Never let a good crisis go to waste, is many politicians' favorite saying. But the crises we're facing more and more needs time to be considered. We need to sit in it because the solution is not as simple as a quick sound bite in front of a media camera or something like that. We're talking a multifaceted issue in our culture and society, and it's very easy to point at one thing or another. I've heard many different arguments, but in the end, I go back to where we started today. People are hurting and people are struggling, and we need to be addressing that in any way we can. And sometimes sitting in these incidents, as the gentleman I was telling you is going to do, can be helpful. Thinking through them, thinking about them, thinking around them. As cognitive behavioral theorists say, playing the tape all the way through to the end and see what's there. There are a lot of things we can do when we're struggling. Going back to dealing with those deep emotions.
So a starting point is really sitting with it.
Hmm.
Making space, time for it. Back to Dr. Frankel's idea, between stimulus and response, there is a space.
Hmm.
And if we don't make space, I have seen this so many times when I was a rabbi and officiate. I would say I did 500 funerals, probably 450. They did not sit Shiva.
Really?
It's not a thing anymore. Now they sat a day or two, maybe
Hmm.
three, but not seven because it's just too long in our culture, right? We live in a
Hmm.
Twitter culture. So who's going to take 7 days to literally sit and do nothing? Um, and we have to make space, right? We have to actually consciously create space, time, place to do this work, to feel these feelings, to sit with it. Doesn't just happen anymore.
It's funny you bring that up. I was thinking those exact things as just thinking about today. What are some of the solutions to our problems today? Sitting in it, setting aside time, just being in the world without having to be active in the world, running about. We spend too much time running, chasing, buying, consuming, purchasing, and sometimes just sitting at home with the family, sitting at home with yourself, sitting at home with your thoughts. Maybe it's not sitting at home, maybe it's sitting out in the woods somewhere with your thoughts and allowing yourself to experience them, to think those thoughts, to feel those emotions, and then to decide what you want to do. Sometimes when we just allow them to pass, they lose their strength. And if they don't, then it's an opportunity to recognize maybe I need to talk to somebody about this.
Yeah, I've experienced this a lot in my life. In the Enneagram world, I'm an Enneagram 8, so I have a sense of urgency, probably like no other type. And I've really had to work hard. I think I've done a lot of work on learning how to hold the feeling or the thing I need to say or do until I don't feel that urgency or that need. Because that in that moment, I'm reacting, right? I'm not responding, I'm reacting. It's driving me. It's making me deliver it or the anger, whatever it is, as opposed to sitting with it, taking stock of it, asking, is this real? Is this true? What in it is mine to share? What's not mine to share? Right?
Mhm.
And really studying it. I've had to because otherwise it hijacks my system,
Right.
especially anger.
Yeah, that's absolutely what it does. It hijacks, not just our mental and emotional health, but eventually our physiological health and certainly our spiritual health as well. It's interesting you bring that up. I've got a note here on my computer because as I'm preparing for those speeches coming up with the construction industry, I realized something. Of course, my question always when I speak to a group is, okay, what are the pain points and what are the specific things I can focus on? Because after a long time, I'll go ahead and admit, nearly 25 years in practice, there's a lot of stuff I can talk about, and so trying to address individual needs is something I certainly want to do when I speak to a group. And it was, I don't know, serendipitous, ironic, just darn near crazy what they came up with because it's the same thing I hear in every group, in every organization, and every individual, right? Shortages of workers, everybody's overworking whatever the industry is, because if you don't have enough people to work, well, the people that are there have to overwork. So stress due to lack of resources, supply chain demand, all of these things, and coming up to burnout, right? So how do we take these ideas that you and I were talking about here and apply them in a greater scope to groups of individuals, organizations, workplaces?
I'm utilizing right now the Enneagram for that purpose, in no small measure because it depersonalizes the issue, the darkness, the character flaw. Coming back to that example of anger, I, I've come to this understanding that yes, I need to take responsibility, as Dr. Frankl talks a lot about, for what's mine, right? I have to take responsibility for it, but it's not who I am. I am nous. I am spirit. I am true self, whatever you want to call it. That is my false self. That's a version of me in fear and reaction. It isn't to excuse my actions, it's to explain them. It's not to excuse them, but I can start to depersonalize this and not make it about me and make it about the action. So, not that you are, but an Enneagram 1 oftentimes reacts by being controlling, whereas an
Oh yeah,
8,
that is me. That is me. Yeah,
I
go
know.
ahead. You can just put that on me.
So,
Yeah, I
where,
know.
where,
Nice.
whereas, whereas I express anger, not ones tend to repress anger and push it down, and it comes out in more of the seething, and I come out more. But once we can get to that point, we can talk about the reaction as coming from a place of fear, doubt, insecurity. It's not who you are, it's what you do. It's not what you do when you're conscious, it's what you do when you're unconscious. All of a sudden now we have a platform to depersonalize this. People can hear it now in a way that they could never hear of. Dan, you're being so controlling.
Mhm.
Totally different conversation.
Right.
So that's my key ingredient right now that I'm grappling with, is depersonalize it and talk about the actions, not the person.
Okay, B. Let's turn tables on this role play here. I'm an owner of a construction company. Can't get enough people to work, and the people I do have are working, 12 and 14-hour days, 5 days a week, and extra on Saturday. What in the world does an 8 or a 1 have to do with me struggling to work hard enough to keep people working?
It's a good question. So for me, it all comes back to the Frankel idea of, do you want to live your life in reaction or response? I have never met anybody who says, I long to live in reaction. I've yet to meet that guy or gal. I want to be on autopilot. Now we end up there, we all do, but nobody chooses it by definition. It's not a choice. And so when the pressure is mounting for you, Mr. Construction business owner, and you're starting to lose your ability to choose, right? You're going into reaction. Let's say you're an 8, you're going to take it out on the few loyal employees that you have. So if we want to maximize efficiency in your business setting, let's start with, I call it trickle down, Reagan at trickle down economics, trickle down emotional work. You bring your noise down, you bring your anxiety, your anger down, you're going to bring the systems down. They're going to be happier. People are going to be more productive. You can do more with less.
Yeah, that's so much of what the research is saying that I've read before the Purpose Summit I went to a few weeks ago, but especially now after, from some of the speakers. If as a leader in any industry, right? First of all, and I'll certainly talk more about this when I do the podcast recapping it. If you're listening to this podcast with B and I, you're a leader somewhere in your life, right? Because if you're not, you're just not listening to this just for for fun because you like our voice and our hairstyles, right? There's somewhere that you lead, whether it's your family, your community, your church, your work, your organization, right? So everybody's a leader in some way. There are ways to improve that, to lead better, to impact people better. If you're struggling with not having enough people, as B said, take care of the ones you do have. And there are great ways to do that, being more empathic, being more caring, which sounds almost, many of the groups I talk to, manufacturing, construction, things like that, like, what do you mean be more caring to my people? And that's a great conversation, and hours of lecture if needed, right?
Yes. And that comes down to, it's just so simple. Like, this stuff is not complicated, but we all need to be reminded it's seeing the person,
Hmm.
seeing each other as Dr. Frankel says, nuos, the
Hmm.
noetic, the essence, not another teacher, my Wayne Dyer, says, not human doings, right?
Hmm.
We're not human doings. Don't treat other people as a doing, as an object, or Martin Buber called it I, thou, I, it, treating
Hmm.
people like an it. See the thou. That's all it is. I mean, you don't have to do kumbaya stuff, but you do when you're talking to somebody, you have to see the thou, the true version of them, and treat them in kind. Changes
It's
everything.
it's really sad, B, but I believe the idea of kumbaya has passed us by in just generations. That is not a phrase of in the culture anymore. But now we talk about woo woo, right? It's
Right.
it's all those, again, quote, soft skills. That's woo woo. But the woo woo and the kumbaya and bring. I mean, it is scientifically proven to help organizations, and there's case studies upon case studies. Better ways to impact groups of people exist.
Amen. We should really focus some of our conversations on transcending woo woo,
Oh man, that's a good title. I love it.
because I have always straddled two worlds,
Hmm.
feeling equally uncomfortable in both of them.
Hmm.
I've straddled the spiritual world. Some of my best wives are spiritual woo woo types,
Hmm.
and I, a lot of the people I've kind of guided over the years are woo woo ish, and yet I've always been in business, and I've really enjoyed and loved that piece. And it's almost an either or proposition. Either you're in the woo woo world, or you're in the business, secular, whatever world.
Hmm.
And I can't live with either or. I know you can't either.
Right. Yeah, not anymore. And that's a lot of what was talked about and what I'm reading. You got it. In today's climate, you have to do both in a balanced or integrative way. And it's possible, and quite honest, well, and maybe it's our bias, it's pretty damn fun bringing the woo woo to the business, bringing the woo woo to manufacturing, bringing the kumbaya circle and the drum beats to places where, hey, if the United States military brings this stuff in and finds it acceptable, I think the rest of us should be pretty okay with it.
So I'd say it's more than okay. I have yet to meet an exec. I've been working a lot with, C-suite types now, executive professionals. And I have yet to, I mean, I guess it's self-select because I'm, only working with the ones who want to do this work, but
Hmm.
I have yet to meet anybody who has rejected the idea of meaning. Right? Nobody says, I don't want more meaning. I've never met that person. I don't think you'll ever. Who doesn't want more meaning or purpose or clarity of vision, whatever you want to call it? And so it's a lot of it is a language barrier,
Right.
um, a mechanism, a delivery mechanism problem, which is, plug for logotherapy, why I think logotherapy's time has come,
Hmm.
because it is perfectly poised at the crossroads of religion, spirituality, psychology, secular business, enterprise. Like, there
Hmm.
is a space in there where this fits in.
Yeah. Oh, and it's for those of you listening, the wave is coming crashing. We are in pre-production for the feature film with Dr. Highlighting Dr. Frankel's life and theories, right? And it's not going to be some independent film agency, but we're looking at some really. I wish it's not going to be you or I that plays the good doctor, but there is going to be somebody out there much more famous, and it'll be interesting to see what that does. That's a lot of what I've been hearing from those people that I talk to. That we really want to make this big and get this out there. And it's interesting to hear you say that. I was talking to a retired cardiologist, right? So this individual has helped save lives countless times for the past 50 years or so. And I said, well, you know what? I usually start most people out as I encourage them to read Man's Search for Meaning. He read it before the next session, was emailing me prolifically. I said, you know what? You're a learned man. I think Doctrine of the Soul would be really good for you. Had it done in a week. And he said, literally, nearly screaming at me, why don't we have more of this out there? Why aren't people, I've heard of everybody's heard of Freud and most people have heard of Adler. Why aren't we talking more about Frankl? And I've never understood that. But as you and I say, that's our job, is to bring it out more.
We're going to have another conversation. I got to write all these down about, why logotherapy has thus far failed to scale. And there's a lot of different factors, but speaking positively, its time has come in my estimation because people are unchurched, they're unsynagogued, and yet we need something spiritual, something deeper than just this worldly. And it's the only path or system I've found that doesn't care about the religious dogma and still holds on to this nous, this essence, this spirit, and puts it into terms secular that I can get behind, relate to, utilize.
Regardless of your church or not church, recognizing that there's stuff out there we don't understand. Some of that is within us, and there are ways to gain understanding through logotherapy, logo philosophy, if we call it that these days. The meaning, finding meaning, understanding what it is, how to achieve it, and how to live your life in a meaningful way.
In every context, there is no such thing as business and home, right? What you do in your business impacts your home, and what you do in your home impacts your business. As I think of it, usually as a circle. You can't, if it's a true circle, you can't expand in one direction and not expand in all directions. And so this expansionist approach to life, getting bigger, not smaller, moving through our fears, going out into the world, can begin at home, in your marriage, or with your children, but it can also begin in the workplace with your employees or with your colleagues or with yourself. And so wherever you find yourself, right, just expand the circle.
Yep. It goes against the old idea, not even old, it was just a few years ago. Everybody's talking about work-life balance. And now it's, almost separating the two of them. And now there's been a beautiful movement to say, no, it's not about work-life balance. We're not separating them. It's work-life integration. And when you can take meaning, when you can take these ideas, the woo-woo, the kumbaya, empathy, understanding people's humanity, and you learn that yourself, then you can bring that to the workplace and you can have a prolific impact.
And my big takeaway from this is nobody uses kumbaya anymore. So
I know you gotta come on, man. You gotta update yourself with that, right? So let's we highlighted so many ideas, right? If you're struggling, take a step back, maybe step back out of the world and give some time for yourself, be with family, be on your own, pray, meditate, be in nature, and just allow those emotions and thoughts to be, and see where they come, see where they go for you.
Amen. And bring these difficult conversations out of the shadows and into the light, because you can, what is it? I changed the quote into darkness delayed is not darkness denied, right? From Justice. So darkness delayed is not darkness denied. You don't deny it. It goes underground. It festers. It'll take your life in 1,000 different ways. So bring these conversations into a safe space with Dr. Dan or me or a trusted professional or loved one, and work through them finally and fully. And so probably a good place to end.
I hate when we come to that because it's such a wonderful time chatting with you, but I'm betting the run's over, the workout's done, the car drive to work is somebody's trying to get in their office door going, I wish these two, I get it, and I'm going to do those things.
So thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to talking to you in the next time in the Meaning Project and the Defiant Spirit joint venture together. They can get a hold of you at...
You can find me at danielafranz.com, DanielAFranz.com. And what about you, B?
I am over now at the defiantspirit.org, and I would love to have you come over and check out my new Enneagram program. Until the next time, take care.
Awesome. Take care, brother.